is Cha Mancini, and I'm the event coordinator for the spring series. And I'm very proud to present Ling O'Connor, who teaches environmental science here. She's going to be our facilitator for all 4 spring workshops. Look at your bulletins, your portals, and if you don't have any flyers, you can contact me. It's Cha Mancini, Human Resources, and I'll make sure that you get the information so you guys can sign up for all of her workshops this spring. And with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Ling O'Connor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming here. And what I really like today is really create a space for us, campus members to have a dialogue about what's in our food. So I'm sure all of you have some ideas what's in your food. Does anybody want to share? What are some of the things they think is in your food? Preservatives. Chemicals. Pesticides. Hormones.
Water.
A lot of water. Already? All right, good. So a lot of you have some sense of what's in your food, right? So when I was preparing for this conversation, so I was like, okay, so there's all kinds of stuff in the food. Where do I even start? So one of the things I did is I went on the FDA and looked at the list of approved additives. Right? So the first thing you want to do is when you want to know what's in your food, you do what? You look at the labels, right? Everybody read labels, right, these days to find out what's in your food. So I said, okay, let me find out how many additives are there. So I went on a website, there are pages and pages and pages of it. I was like, it's obvious, I can't count them. And there's nowhere on the web page I could find out, a total number. So I called them. It took them like a while to respond. So finally, they called me back, actually this Monday. So the answer was, we don't know. He said, you can just count. I said, well, I gave up after 500. I never really tried, actually, because there were so many. He said, well, we really don't know how many there are, but we think, now, listen, this is approved additives, right? It's not like just how many are there. We don't really know. We think there's over 3,000. And then he goes, do you know what that means? Do you know what is a food additive? I said, well, just the definition you have online. He said, well, that doesn't include flavoring compounds. And there are thousands of those. Cool. Then he says it also does not include all those chemicals that they are considered GRAS. GRAS stands for generally recognized as safe. I said, okay, so who decides if something is GRAS? He says, any qualified being. What makes a person qualified? Well, if they're just qualified. All right, so that's okay. All right, so okay, I'm making a loaf of bread. I'm going to put in my label what I have in there. So do I have to show? So if I say this is grass, then I don't even have to put in a food label. So who decides this is, and do I have to prove to the FDA this is indeed grass? He said, no. And then I said, okay, so now I have this label that I'm listing some of these things. Who decides, who verifies that's really what's in there? No one. He goes, well, that's a waste of the FDA's resources to try to figure out what's in them. So bottom line, so these are sort of what I got from the conversation. And then I asked him, I said, hey, can I have your name and phone number so I can call you back? We have more questions. So he gave me his name, and he said, well, you can call this number. Chances are I would not be talking to you because I'm the director of the division. So I didn't get anywhere from there. And then there are just thousands and thousands of chemicals. Where do you even begin? Where do you even start? So what I decided to do was this, that I decided to really look at the 2 leading causes of death in the US. And maybe look at, whatever is out there that relates to these 2 leading causes of death. So that's my final approach. So one of the first things I found that relates to these 2 is what's in your food is your tax dollars. And the biggest chunk of the farm subsidies goes to corn. So So you can see, and now how does that relate to heart disease and cancer? So the thing with farm subsidy is that actually most of you probably know the biggest chunk of the farm subsidy goes to the really rich farmers. They don't really help little farmers at all. So what happens is that we overproduce, crops have been subsidized, and the price become very, very low. Because we produce so much corn, the price is so low, we have to find ways to use them. So one of the ways to use them is to make corn syrup. And what's really interesting is that you think you're eating healthy food. If you look carefully, corn syrup's found its way even in what is considered healthy food. Here's only one of the examples. Notice how many times that corn is actually mentioned. And this is actually expensive yogurt, considered healthy. This is actually a label for salad dressing. So if you think you're eating healthy, look carefully at your food salad dressing. Actually, I found a whole bunch of them, salad dressing. I didn't end up taking all those pictures. Show you again and again, it's showing up in food salad dressing. So it's obvious, right? So corn syrup goes up, obesity goes up, so that's really obvious, and most everybody knows that. Next one. And this is from the Center for Disease Control, the National Institute of Health statistics. And how does that relate to the two top killers in the US? Well, so the graph speaks for itself. Next one, please. Now that's pretty obvious, straightforward, right? Okay, we've grown all this corn, we find ways to use it, we make corn syrup, it gets into everything we eat, so people's weights are going up, obesity is going up, and that's related to cancer and heart disease. But what is not straightforward and obvious was what's termed the American paradox. What the American paradox is that while the consumption of fat has gone down, obesity has gone up. So you have two graphs, consumption of fat going this way, obesity going this way. So for a while, it's sort of like a mystery, right? Because all of you have heard of the low-fat diet, right? That kind of dominated the US sort of like ideology of nutrition for a really long time. Recently, someone wrote a paper in the Journal of History of Medicine and Related Sciences. The author calls the whole idea low-fat an ideology. the reason she called it ideology is that because it's really based on very, very little science, very, very little evidence. But it conquered U.S., it ruled the U.S., and in fact, the government begins to tell people what to eat, and the government begins to promote a low-fat diet. But the paradox is that low-fat diet is actually having sort of like opposite as obesity. And like we saw earlier, obesity is related to heart disease. So the incidence of heart disease in the same period also went up. So whereas people are eating low fat because it's supposed to be better for your heart, but incidence of heart disease is actually going up. And death from diseases also going up. And notice I'm using like government data. I'm not using some environmentalist data. I was trying to very hard to stick with government sources. Next one, please. So it turned out that when you take in fat, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a biochemist. I would try to read the original material, and it's really, really complicated, and I just end up falling asleep. But there's some like simplified maps like this. So when you take in fat, you can see that it can go two different directions. Right? Our body needs fat. And two of the essential fats our body cannot make are omega-6 and omega-3. So when you take these fats in, so we have, like, there's really important functions, right? So you can see that it can go one way or the other way. Both ways, both are really important. So what researchers have found that it's not so much the total fat you take in, but the ratio of the kind of fat you take in. Yes?
Is it a lipid of fat?
Yeah, yeah. So it seems like if you take omega-3 encourages to go this way, and omega-6 encourages to go this way. So unfortunately for me, because I am not a biochemist, there's another researcher. He's actually a medical doctor. He's also a neuroscientist, and he suffered from a brain tumor himself. So he just wrote this book called Anti-Cancer, A New Way of Life. I really recommend you to check it out if you haven't seen it. So in his book, he puts it in everyday language for us. So ultimately, omega-3 promotes inflammation that's related to all kinds of diseases and stimulates fat cell production. So if you eat more omega-6, you're likely to gain weight. And so it makes cells more rigid, so promote diseases once again. So on the other side, omega-3, that's the opposite. So what people found out is not so much the total intake of fat, but the kind of fat that you take in. So how does that relate to back what we're talking about? So you would go back to this chart. So because of low-fat ideology ruled America, so fat consumption went down. But we can't just not have fat. So instead, we're taking in vegetable oils. What is it saying to you so far? And what does that mean to you?
It doesn't seem to mean what kind of, the kind of fat makes a difference, but the total fat intake has increased over time for America.
Good job. So even though we're eating low fat, we're not really taking in less fat. We're actually taking in more fat. We're taking in more fat because what? What?
We're eating more fatty food.
We're eating more fatty food, thank you. And one of the reasons that we're eating more fatty food is because we want to go low fat, and fat is flavor. We like fat, right? This is how we are wired, you know. Fat is important for us. You can see all that function that we need the fat, and fat stores up for rainy days, right? So it's really important. We like fat. So when we go to low fat food doesn't taste so good for us anymore. So we put in more sugar, and we put in other kinds of fat, right? So what else do you get out of this?
Well, I think it's like that you don't see, because animals are a little more like us and we see that they have fat like us. Like we don't want to duplicate that, so that seems bad. But we're so segregated from plants that we just don't think of them as the same thing, that their fats can possibly affect us in that way too. So.
Okay, that's a really good idea. I like that. I never thought of that. So this is really cool for doing this kind of stuff. I always learn something new. I mean, most everything I'm sharing with you today, I learn new doing research for this presentation. And conversation like this is really awesome. Like always learn something new. What else do you get from this? So okay, maybe another way to ask a question. So what do you eat and what do you think you should eat now? Talk to each other for a second. Okay, guys. It's always really nice seeing people talking to each other. Like, great ideas comes out of it. So thank you very much for your participation. Well, would it be fair to say that somehow we got this idea we should use vegetable oil supposedly instead rather than fat? Yeah? Olive oil is good. You should take olive oil. All right. We know that not all vegetable oils are equal. Yeah, we all know this, right? So just vegetable oils is not necessarily going to be the good thing. So let's take a closer look. So there's also a study that actually correlates that with higher margarine consumption with increased incidence of heart disease. So you can see that as you are actually, butter consumption is not the problem. It's actually, I'm not going to say it's a problem. It's a correlation. We're finding it with margarine, not with butter. Yeah? So the next one, please. And what's really surprising to me is that consumption of vegetable oil has been correlated with increased incidence of skin cancer. And in fact, using sunscreen has not decreased incidence of skin cancer. Instead, it's actually correlated with increased consumption of vegetable oil.
Wow.
But there's a certain vegetable oil.
Well, okay, we'll get to that. But actually, there's more research. What I really want to find things in graphic forms, right? There's actually more research paper I have read that correlated with increased consumption of vegetable oil with breast cancer and ovarian cancer. But I didn't have a graph for it, so I didn't put it up there. Okay, next one, please. So, so obviously, not all vegetable oils are equal. So here's a list. I apologize, I couldn't find a better graphic, once again, that will show that more easily, that is more readable than this. So what are the most common, if you buy a bag of chips, what oil do you think is in there?
Corn oil. Hydrogenated bad stuff, clog the arteries.
So if you're afraid of butter, you should be way afraid of chips. So, next one, please. So we saw all those charts before, right? Obesity going up, heart rates going up, incidence of heart disease and death going up. And what's also going up is consumption of corn oil. Next one, please. Now, most of us know this is not the kind of farm that our food comes from. Yes? We know that, right? Even though, when we visualize a farm, maybe this is what's in your head. We know in reality, this is not where our food comes from. Next, please. Instead, what are they eating?
Corn.
They're eating corn. Why are they eating corn? Because it's cheap. Why is it cheap? because it's subsidized, and also it makes them fat. Very good, right? So mixing fat means they get more.
You are what you eat.
They are making more dollar, right? So the next one, please.
We're finally getting it.
Yeah, that is good.
Oh, so this is the cow feed.
Exactly. So just like the humans, cows can't make omega-6 or omega-3 either. So what they get depends on what they eat. So it turned out their fat content, their fat composition is depending on what we feed them. And cows are not used to eating corn. Right? So they have, you have data show that cows are eating grass. Their omega-3 and omega-6 content is very similar to like a wild game. Right? And if they're eating grass, the ratio can be omega-6 and 3 can be 1:1. But instead, when you feed them corn, it makes a huge difference. So it's not just a matter whether you are eating butter or not. Rather, you are eating what kinds of butter. The question is not so much you're eating the butter. The question is, what is a cow actually eating? Sorry.
Did you do that?
I found it online.
That scares me.
Good job. You should be scared. I want you to be scared. So the point here is that even if you're eating organic cow, it doesn't matter. If the cow has been fed organic corn, then that cow is organic. Yeah? So even if the cow is eating organic corn, then the cow is officially organic. So when you eat the cow, you're eating a cow that's eating corn, so you're eating cow with different composition of fat. That's like favoring omega-6. The ratio goes up to 1:40 of omega-6. Scary kind of ratios.
So we should be asking on our food label to put not just fat, but omega-3.
They actually don't tell you that. In fact, it's been really difficult for me to track down, what they do. Some products actually say grass-fed, so that's what you want to look for. If you're eating cow, you want to look for grass-fed, and the same is true for chickens and eggs. So you have no idea whether, even if the chicken or egg says free range, organic, it doesn't matter. Again, if they're eating organic corn, that they're still giving you loads of omega-6. Right? So, and just before I forget, you know what it means to be free range, right?
They're not cages, they're allowed to have so much
All it's required for them to label as being free range, and still they're packed up like this, is they have some kind of an opening this size somewhere. So the chicken has an option to go out if they choose to. That's all that's required to say free range. That's all it means.
So you said the best thing if you're buying chicken to buy grass-fed. What about, I've seen then labels that say grain-fed. Is that just as good?
Grain-fed is corn.
Grain, yeah.
Grain is corn. Yeah, you don't want grain-fed. And it's really, really difficult to find. You can find eggs that says omega-3 eggs. They're fed flaxseed oil. The chicken's flaxseed, not flaxseed oil. Which is good, which is what you want. Yeah. But they're very, very difficult to find. Vons does not carry it. But I think Whole Food does. And little health markets do. But it's almost impossible to find that information, actually. So this is a question I really want you to answer. So is cheap food really cheap? You hear this argument all the time, right? I can't afford to eat healthy. Now, people really say that all the time. So is cheap food really cheap? Talk to each other for a second. All right. Okay, so who would like to share? Somebody wants to share? Yes.
Okay, well, when you eat cheap food, we know it has a lot of garbage in it, and it's not really cheap because then you get sick and you go to the doctor, and that's an expense there, but, it's not cheap.
That's one piece of it, right? So one piece of it is really not cheap at all. When you get sick, you have to pay, right? You wanted to say something?
She basically said what I said, but people always look at the short end. If you pay now, if you don't pay now, you're going to pay later. So we're better off to pay a little bit more now in the long run, and when we're healthier all throughout our lives, than try to be, cheap about not buying good food.
All right, it's like the...
And plus, I've read also that the less time a food takes to cook, the better. In other words, like fruits and vegetables, they usually are a little bit healthier.
Well, we'll see. Well, the point is, the cartoon was like Hamburger Tuesday and Pay Wednesday. Does anybody know that cartoon? That's very much become our sort of like the rule that we live by. But what is another piece? Yes?
You get what you pay for.
Well, really, wait a minute though. What about the tax dollars? There's enough food.
Well, yeah.
Everything you said is true, but what about the tax dollars?
Just think about like a burger that costs $1. Okay, you start with the buns, the meat, the cheese, the pickles, the ketchup, the worker who made it, the wrapping, the advertising, the shipping, all of these inputs, and they add up to $1.08. That makes no sense. So where's all the money coming from?
All right, good job. So don't forget that you are actually paying big time, right? Food tax dollars, right? Okay, so this is one piece. Next conversation. So all that was just about what's in your food. The first one was tax dollars, right? So I invite you to really keep thinking about this. Is your tax dollars at work, and what is it actually doing to you? The next conversation is I started looking at this report on human exposures to environmental chemicals. And again, this report is prepared by the National Institute of Health. I'm only taking governmental papers. So, and they actually tested 212 chemicals, and they tested, I think, about 2,400 people across the country. So here's again, next please. I hate wordy slides, but I decided to just take their exact report so you see the report and not my paraphrasing instead. So this is from the summary of the report. The report is really, really long, but this is from the summary itself. And it says, starts right out, widespread exposure to industrial chemicals. And so the very first one is also known as PBDE. These are flame retardants, and they're found in nearly all the participants. And one of the way you get it is through your food. Flame retardants. Next one, please. So, unfortunately, these couches don't come with a warning sign. They should. In order to make it really nice and comfy and bounces right back up when you get up, we have to put all kinds of crap in it. And this crap, if you don't put flame retardant on it, it will just go explode if it gets hot, right? We can't have that. So we have to put flame retardant to make sure it doesn't explode when it gets really hot. But this flame retardant is actually very volatile. So it can actually get through your skin, and it gets into the environment, and it gets to your food. Next one. What they all have in common is that they all have flame retardants in them. So you can, they're so cute.
Get a real one.
Flame retardants are actually found in fabric, so you actually can be wearing it. They're in bedding, so you're sleeping in it. So you're nice and soft. In carpet, you're standing on it. In your computers, you're typing on it. On your TV. And it is in your food. And how does exactly flame retardant get into our food? We don't really know exactly. They're getting into waste many ways, and we know that we're finding in our blood. You saw that in just about every sample that's been taken is in their blood. Some ways it can get through, obviously through the environment. It gets into the soil, gets into the water. It's also when the vegetables and fruits and vegetables, even fruits and vegetables, when they're being shipped in crates, these plastic crates, again, they're flame retardant on them. They're stored. We do all kinds of amazing things to our fruits and vegetables to keep it looking pretty for long periods of time. So all that, during that period, the flame retardants are actually leaking into the food. Yes?
What about the waxes that they put on fruits?
Oh God, that's another whole category I decided not to go into. There's like over 20 different kinds of stuff they put on your food as waxes, petroleum byproducts, all different kinds. So there are lots of, see, like we said in the beginning, you weren't here, we talked about there's thousands and thousands. I don't even know where to begin. So I decided to focus on what causes cancer and what kills you, like cancer and heart disease, two things. Right. Next up, please. So that was the first one, the first chemicals. Found widespread chemicals, 3 different chemicals. That's PBDE. Next one is BPA, bisphenol A. And that gets into your food through plastic. It leaks from plastic stuff that you store your food in. And that's the chemical ingredient used to make plastic hard. So a lot of baby bottles have BPA in them. And you can see that more than 90% tested have that. Next one, please. So these are all the products that contain BPA, that leaks BPA into your food. Almost all canned foods, soda pops, drinks, the lining of the can contains BPA. And some states have banned baby bottles. I think Canada banned baby bottles containing BPA.
Lee, what about water bottles?
Water bottles are a very good way to get your BPA fixed. Yes.
Question, a lot of baby bottles say BPA free. Does that mean anything?
Okay, thank you for your question. The next slide, please. Well, all these products claim not to have BPA, but have BPA. They claim to have not contained BPA. So, speaking of water bottles, so one of the alternatives is go to metal water bottles, right? One of the metal bottles available is Steak. It's really expensive. It's made in Europe, and they advertise how they have. They don't list what's in their lining inside because they say it's a biological lining. It's trade secret, And this is from Switzerland, right? You tend to trust them, right? So this is really safe. So I spent, I think, close to $100 buying 3 of them at Whole Foods, only to find out a year later, after having used them a year, through a very obscure publication that that comes through to me because wacky people send me email about things like this, and I found out that they're actually leaking BPA. And the company actually acknowledged that you can actually take your older bottles and return them for free at Whole Foods and REI. So, yes.
And what about the Clean Canteen? Are you familiar with them?
No, actually. I have just gone away from using them altogether because there have been problems with aluminum leaking, steel, other things leaking into the water. I mean, I just think back like 30 years ago before bottled water became popular. What did people do? They crawl around, thirsty all day, or they're okay? I mean, think about it. When did it become a necessity that we'll all be walking around with bottled water? So I basically stopped doing that altogether. Yes?
So what do you use?
I don't use the bottled water. I don't use anything at all. I do drink tap water, yes. I have a mug in my office and I go to the drinking fountain. Yeah. So, next one, please. So this is a third chemical. The third chemical is, PFOA. These are the what's things that makes nonstick, nonstick pans, like in Teflon and stuff like that. And so those are 3 top. Almost in everything, over 90%, and this is, most of everybody have this. Next one, please. So these are the products that you can also, again, be wearing it. It could be in your carpet for stain resist, to make it stain resistant, right? So in cooking with it. Now, what do they all have in common? What they all have in common, those top 3 reported in the report, all top 3 are endocrine disruptors. So they're all in your food, and they're also endocrine disruptors. And once again, I go to the government to find the most conservative, supposedly reliable report again. So this is a 2010, it came out in 2010, report on endocrine disruptors. So what are they? So what do you get from this picture? No, all right, no discrimination there for a change. All right, good. And do you think these things are important?
Yeah.
you think so? They're important. So what endocrine disruptors do is they mess with all of these. That's what they mean, right? And how does it work? How does it work? So you have a cell, you have a receptors, and those little balls are hormones. And so it sort of works like a lock and key, right? So what some of the sort of endocrine disruptor, they fall into 3 different categories actually. Most commonly in these 2 categories, the first one is they mimic a hormone. They act like a hormone. So they're turning you on and off as you eat your food. So they actually go into the slot like a hormone, or they go into to actually tell your body to do what your normal hormone would normally tell you to do. Or they can block up these spaces, so your real key cannot go in. So those are the ways the endocrine disruptors work. Next one, please. So once again, I'm just cut and paste from the report. Exposure at low levels. So what you hear about the argument is always, oh, well, this is very low levels at all. It's not going to affect you. So the report actually reports on what happens with low levels. I just give you a minute to read it. Next one, please. So even at low dosages, these are the possible results, possible effects on you. Next one, please. Now, we're going full circle again now. We're coming back. That's a really interesting piece to me that was news to me also, that these endocrine disruptors are actually linked to obesity and diabetes. So you begin to see that there's very little you can actually do. One of the things that was really curious is like infants are getting fat these days. Why do we have obese infants? You can't blame that on McDonald's or lack of exercise. It's actually the chemicals that we're finding in our environment getting into our food. Next one, please. So just a reminder, the relationship. Next one. Another piece is that these endocrine disruptors, once they get into the environment, they take forever to degrade, or we haven't seen them to go away yet. Like DDT has been banned a long time ago, and they are showing up in the report. Like earlier, the National Institute of Health report, in people's blood and urine. And so I actually, this is not at all comprehensive. I just picked out a few so we can talk about today. So I picked these because PCBs and DDTs have both been banned for decades, and they're still showing up in people's bodies. And dioxin, everybody knows about dioxin, yeah? There are a group of chemicals, there are dioxin-like chemicals, and they're associated, everybody knows about Agent Orange. Well, that's what makes Agent Orange so deadly. It's because of dioxins. It's a byproduct in Agent Orange. And that is showing up in our food. So what's common about all of them, they're all showing up in our food. So PCBs and DDT, I picked them out because they've been banned for decades. Dioxin, I thought everybody knows about dioxin. But not everybody probably heard about phthalates. First of all, you can't even say it, right? Phthalates. What are they? Okay. Now remember BPA is a chemical that makes plastic hard. Phthalate are chemicals that makes plastic soft. Good job. Makes plastic soft. You said that? Yeah. All right, good. The next one, please. So there are all kinds of efforts to ban phthalates in babies' toys. So one of the things that's very common is like, teethers, because it's nice and soft to gum on. Right? You wonder then why babies are getting fat? Yes.
My mom used to give us onion.
Oh, wow, good for her. Stop you chewing real fast, right? Next one, please. So what's common again here is all these things that contain phthalates. This goes from tennis shoes, shower curtains, flooring, perfumes, inside the perfume. So every time you buy a product, it says fragrance on it. It probably means it has phthalate. They don't have to say anything what's in the fragrance by law. So they just use fragrance. And most of the time, that means it has phthalate in it. Huh? Vinyl, yeah. And it is in your food. And it's in your fruits and vegetables, not in your meat. And there's a group of, just did the research last year. They compared 4 different groups of people. People who are really careful about what they eat and taking supplements. People who are just eat really healthy, all eat natural. People don't really care about what they eat. And people who eat a lot of junk food. What they found was there's no significant difference at all in their intake in phthalate. Yeah. In fact, the group that eats a lot of vegetables and fruits had a little more than the other groups.
Have they done any studies to find if there's a difference in the chemicals grown in different countries? Whereas areas here where, there's a lot of urban, chemical exposure to urban living because of chemicals, would there be more chemicals in the food grown here as compared to some country like that is?
They have, first of all, to answer your question, there are over 100,000 man-made chemicals in the environment. So what does that say to you? That says to you, what can they do? What can they test? Right? And there's over 10,000 suspected endocrine disruptors. And last we heard, Environmental Protection Agency has not tested a single one of them. They spent $80 million, but haven't tested any chemicals. Yes?
It's counterintuitive, though, that people who ate, more fruits and vegetables would have actually more of this than others.
It doesn't include organic.
Do you think?
Well, because, if other, say the people on the opposite end, if they're eating foods especially high in fats and sugary foods, ready-made meals, we know that that's full of a lot of the things you're talking about.
This is about phthalates in particular.
This is just about phthalates.
If it's on fruits and vegetables, if
It's
somebody
on
eats more
everything.
fruits and vegetables, they have to eat more because it's low-density food as compared to eats a cheeseburger.
Well, we don't really know. This is just a research finding. I'm just putting it out there to share. Like I said, really what I want is promote thought. And I want you guys to provoke you to really think and start having conversation. Next one, please.
Somebody mentioned organic food.
Well, we talked about earlier organic. So this is, I'm sorry, your name? So this is just to have a sense no, we don't relate to big numbers, right? When was the last time you had $10,000 in your wallet, in single dollar bills, right? It's like bulging out from your pants. So at least I don't relate to big numbers like 10,000. So what I've done is I took I screw with a bunch of pictures, put them together. I made little squares with geologists were trained how to do this, make little squares and count and figure out how many are in the dot. So this is about 10,000. So imagine yourself sitting in the middle of it, surrounded by 10,000 different endocrine disruptors. Next one. The most scary piece for me is that studies have shown that mice in laboratory anyway, so the mom and dad exposed to pesticides, chemicals in the environment, endocrine disruptors, their granddaughters and grandsons show effects of being affected, even though they've never been exposed. So it is what is called epigenetic event. So what is actually passed on is some kind of chemical that determines what gene is turned on and off in you. We've found epigenetic effects in humans. We know this is true in humans. So this is, again, from the government, National Institute of Health, that these endocrine disruptors get passed on to the future generation, even if they've not been exposed at all. You able to read that?
What does it say, Nathan? I can't read it. The website especially.
It says, all the stuff we've been talking about, is in the reality. So the industry is taking the attitude, let's wait and see. Now remember how we started this conversation. Who actually is watching over what's in our food? The industry. FDA is really not doing anything. Well, so this happens in my class all the time. People just get really quiet. Huh?
That's it, I give up eating.
Right.
It's in the air too, though.
Talk to each other. So what do you take from this? Talk to each other, right? So, but Eric wants to supplement what I just said, and it was a very good point. So I wanted him to say that.
Well, I took Lean's class, and I heard somebody mention what about organic fruits and vegetables. And we think, okay, well, the source of this is the sprays and the chemicals and everything we put on fruits and vegetables. Well, first of all, while I was in a class, I read Silent Spring, which is a great book. Rachel Carson was amazing. But we saw that we still have high concentrations of DDT, even though DDT was banned more than 3 decades ago. DDT, even though it's no longer used, still exists in concentrations in the soil as high as 70% of the original applications.
We actually still make DDT. We produce it. We just ship it to other countries and have them use it. Then we eat their food.
A lot of food comes from other countries. DDT still uses an anti-malarial agent in some countries. Some of our food comes from South America and Africa areas that do have issues with malaria, so that's another issue. Also, how many of your organic fruits and vegetables get packaged in plastics? So just because something's organic doesn't necessarily mean it contains any less chemicals. Like I said, chemicals stay in the soil, so just because you don't use organic-based fertilizers this year doesn't mean that the sprays from the synthetic fertilizers aren't still in the soil in concentrations for many decades to come. So.
Thank you. Now, just to make you feel better, maybe not, that all these chemicals are also found in these creatures. So there's no discrimination against you. so what? Polar bears don't go to McDonald's, but the next one, please. So really what what I really want, like I said, what I really want to do is have everybody start thinking about these things. And ultimately, there is no such thing as a healthy person when the planet is sick. We have to make ultimately the connection between our personal health to the health of the planet. So basically, when you put stuff out there, it's going to come back to you one way or another. So, okay, what are we going to eat? So, I'm just not going to eat. Well, can you stop breathing? Can you stop drinking water? So, what does it really mean? I really, this is what I want to leave you with, that question. What does this really mean? Now, people say this, Lynn, you can't make people so depressed. They go, I can't do anything. So I'm not going to do anything. But then you also, people here say, well, you have to hit bottom before you come up. Well, they're kind of like, so which way do you go? you're not going to do anything until you hit bottom, and you don't tell them they've hit bottom?
Ignorance is not a good thing. Knowledge is power. Even though it may not be happy knowledge, it does increase power.
Thank you. Thank you. But both Shard and I have gotten this response. Both have got this response saying, I don't want to go to this workshop because I don't want to know.
That's their choice.
But that's because people don't know what to do about it, because the problem seems huge. It's like nuclear weapons a while ago. It's so big, how could one little person, or even 10 little people, or even 1,000 little people against corporations who control so much of the power structure in our country, how are they going to make a difference?
Thank you for articulating that, because that's what everybody thinks. That's the unfortunate thing. That's what everybody thinks. Corporations are not mystical, magical. How do they get their powers? They get power by money, by we giving them money. And the only way you can make difference is through individuals. I know a lot of people, get into politics and want to change laws and stuff like that. Most of you know marijuana is not legal, yeah? I'm just speaking to the wrong crowd. No, sorry. Point is, to me, law makes really no difference, unfortunately. And unfortunately, money corrupts, power corrupts, and we don't even want to go there. The only difference that can be made are going to be made by individuals, and the individuals need to understand they have hit bottom. The bottom's been here for a while. I thank you all for your attention. Thank you.